Hello, I want to talk about being cost conscious and why this is causing not only your suffering, but the suffering of your dog and also other humans and other animal species across the planet. When I'm talking about being cost conscious, I'm talking about looking at the dollar value, looking at the situation from what do I get out of it, what do I want. I want a dog breed that's hypoallergenic. I want a dog that's a family dog. I want a dog because that's online because they're cheap. I don't want to pay a lot of money for a dog. The dog has to do this, it has to do this. I can't have a barking dog. I can't have a dog that is inside the house. But you're treating this dog as a commodity, as something that is readily exchangeable on a market or exploited within a market. So you're treating that animal, that living, sentient, breathing animal, as a possession or a thing. So when we look at this, look at every situation from a cost conscious with respect to I, me, my, this is very superficial and it's not taking anybody else's suffering into account except your own. When we're conscious of the cost, we take conscious action, and that means we actually look at the entire situation and we understand inherent things. And what we do is we take action and conscious action to reduce the suffering of not just ourselves in a situation, but also our dogs, other humans, and also other animal species on the planet, every other animal species on the planet. So let's take a look at what I'm talking about. So here it calls for tougher dog attack laws. This poor old dog was attacked not once but twice, once by a German Shepherd and then by a Staffordshire Terrier on two different days and two different times. So unfortunately this dog died. Now, being cost conscious, there were calls for dog owners to be slapped with thousands of fines if their pet attacks another. This is being cost conscious. We're throwing money at it in an effort to reduce this situation, but it's only being conscious of the cost that we're going to collectively raise our human consciousness and change this with respect to the suffering of other animals, the suffering of the humans in that situation, and also the suffering of other animals across the planet. So this disconnection between humans and other animals, other humans, this disconnection with the suffering of other animals and other humans is being cost conscious, because you're looking at it from a superficial I, my, me, myself approach, living in your human condition mindset of what you like, what you don't like, what you judge, what you blame, what you feel resentment about, what you feel anger about. So we can throw lots of money at this situation to find people, but it's not going to change the consciousness of that human involved with respect to acting in a conscious way, because they're living in their conditioned mindset. They're only concerned with their own suffering. So Staffordshire Terriers were bred for bear and bull baiting in the 1800s. That is, they were bred to clamp down and cause damage on the faces and bodies of bears and bulls. When this was outlawed, they were then bred for dog fighting. Now that's something that's bred into the DNA, and when we now have information saying that, about these dogs' family companions, and that they make great pets for families with children, we're not being conscious of the cost of the genetic manipulation of dogs and the dogma surrounding dogs that humans hold with respect to we are the authority, that we shoehorn dogs into a synthetic lifestyle that is like some grotesque Stockholm syndrome for dogs, where they don't get to do anything that's emotionally satisfying from their point of view, yet we then blame them for, in turn, acting according to their breed disposition, or their breed purpose, or their breed, and this is not stereotyping animals, these big dogs have big mouths, big teeth, and they can do damage. It's as simple as that. So if we're not conscious of the cost, then how can we ever hope to reduce our suffering, the suffering of dogs, the suffering of other humans and other animals across the planet? So these are the number of dogs that were declared as dangerous these are the number of reported dog attacks. You could pick these statistics up, plonk them into any timeline over the past 50 years, and you would still have a proportional representation of dog attacks and dogs that were declared as dangerous. So in these situations, of course, when we have these unfortunate, tragic circumstances, obviously the owner had awareness of what the dog was capable of, yet being unconscious of the potential suffering that could be caused on a wider scale, not just her suffering, but also other people and, of course, other animals. And we also have another animal here that was tasered because it was attacking a human and the dog just would not let go. This is in the breed purpose of this dog, a pit bull. So this terrible situation resulted in another human suffering extensive wounds, this poor dog being noosed, tasered, and obviously the fate for this dog would have been euthanasia. And once again, pit bulls were bred for bull baiting, dog fighting. They're also working dogs as catch dogs for wild animals and for herding cattle in the United States. And the AI blurb, companion animals, despite their history, they've been known for their loyalty and affection towards humans, especially as children. Okay, so how can we be conscious of the cost of what we're doing to dogs when we have even this AI technology that is just regurgitating information but not providing any alignment of that information with a higher intelligence to gain wisdom from that and take conscious action to reduce the suffering of not just dogs in that situation, but other humans and other animals across the planet. Another police dog tragedy. 2 dogs die after being left in a specialised police car. Once again, German Shepherds are bred to be herd dogs centuries ago. Now they have roles in the military, in these professional services such as law enforcement. But we're still not conscious of the cost of having an animal like this living a life that is just in a state of hyper-arousal because that dog has been bred and trained to act in an aggressive manner towards humans or threatening situations. So why do we have to have animals enduring suffering in that respect and then, through no fault of their own, die in tragic circumstances like this where that could have been prevented? Can we clone pet dogs? We can clone pet dogs, but is that a good idea? Well, if you can pay enough money for something, you'll get what you want. But here we have an Afghan hound, and so these dogs, beautiful dogs, but they're more prone to having dental problems because they have overbites and malocclusions. So that's a good thing for the veterinary industry, because then we're going to be making more money off that, aren't we? Because that's another dental, that's another extraction, that's another animal that's going to be thrown into the system to then be a dollar value once again, cost conscious rather than being conscious of the cost. Here's another here. New heist as egg prices break records. Wow, what a controversy, having to pay $6 or $7 for, or whatever the price may be for eggs. Yet we look at our own suffering in that trivial suffering, yet we are completely unconscious of the cost of the suffering of the animals who are providing that product. This is really interesting. The feeling of life itself, why consciousness is widespread but can't be computed. Now, they're talking about a different definition of the word consciousness. They're talking about it from a scientific point of view, which is really ironic, because what they're looking at here is, you can see these probes are embedded into this poor animal's brain to detect to detect activation of the claustrum, which ironically is very important with respect to attention, perception and consciousness. So this is another area where we're not conscious of the cost. So how many more laboratory experiments do we have to subject animals to without their consent? Let's ask ourselves, humans can consent, so why can't we have humans consenting to these laboratory experiments? That sounds outrageous, doesn't it? Yet we are quite willing to do this to other animals that we see as having a lower consciousness or a lower IQ or a lower importance in the ladder of life, that we're willing to force them to suffer in these conditions every single day. Barking is a normal behaviour and a form of communication that serves multiple purposes, says the RSPCA. Constant barking, howling, crying, whining is not an offence under the Animal Care and Protection Act 2001. So if you look at the Animal Care and Protection Act, they talk about breaches of care with respect to your duty of care to an animal. And if you put an animal in your care in a position of stress, anxiety, fear or anything like that, then you can be committing an offence under that act. But constant barking, howling, crying, whining, dogs don't do that when they're happy. They do that when they're bored, when they're in distress, when they're frustrated, when they're lonely, when they're panicked, when they're fearful, when they're trying to self-soothe. So barking is a normal behaviour. Yeah, of course it's normal in circumstances where a dog is feeling a particular emotional state. And those emotional states can range from fear, anxiety, panic, distress, boredom, frustration. So why wouldn't that be an offence? In many cases, the owner is unaware of the situation, especially when they're not home during the day, usually for 16 hours of the day, and then they've got something better to do. And then they come home on the weekend and the dog might get a walk if they're lucky, but that walk means that they can't have a sniff, they're getting jerked on their lead and pulled in different directions, and their walk's cut short because the human might have to put a bet on or go and play the pokies or have something better to do, go and watch a football game, or just go and sit and scroll on your Facebook page. So problems occur for both owners and neighbours when the barking becomes excessive. So this is a problem for owners and neighbours. But what about, this is being cost conscious of our own suffering, but what about the animal that we've put in that situation in the first place, that we have not even considered their suffering? Baby wombat outrage. So there were calls to deport this US influencer who was being cost conscious. What do I get? My 15 minutes of fame, my 2,000 likes, shares, subscribes, all of these sorts of things, for stealing a wild baby wombat from their mother and running over towards a camera to get it on film. So I want to ask you, out of all the things that I showed you in this video, what are you more outraged by? Is it the last one? So this basically says a lot about our level of consciousness. When you start to shift into consciousness, you won't just be conscious of the cost of this slide here with the baby wombat. You won't just be conscious of the suffering of that little baby animal and the mother. You'll be conscious of the suffering that occurs in this situation. You'll be conscious of the suffering that's occurring in this situation, in this situation, in this situation, in this situation, as well as this situation and this situation. So what I'm hoping that you can see is when you shift into consciousness, you're not just thinking about yourself, you're thinking about actions that you can take that will reduce not just your suffering in the situation, okay, but how you will reduce your dog's suffering. The humans around you, how you can reduce their suffering, whether you have a barking dog, whether you have a dog that growls at the postman going past, whether you have a dog that pulls on leash and is reactive to other dogs. You're going to start thinking about that and taking action in a conscious way. You might even actually think, well, maybe I can not eat eggs for a week or 2 weeks. Maybe you can think, maybe I might just eat meat twice a week. Maybe I might eat meat maybe just once a week. You start taking conscious action because you are aware of not just your own suffering, but the suffering of your dog, other humans and every other species, and the suffering that they are enduring right across the planet, right at this very moment as we speak. We'll talk again soon.